Do you want to know how to get from teacher burnout to love teaching again? I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach all over the world about parenting, good communication, how to build strong family bonds, child development, and education. And in this video, we're talking about how to help you go from burnout to loving what you do again. I am a teacher. I've taught for 23 years at private academies, the collegiate level, and also the homeschool level. In fact, a lot of people know me for my homeschooling teaching. I teach at some of the biggest conferences around the world about education and have written 11 books about families and learning, and I have websites and everything related to learning and education. But I also was raised by a family of teachers, public school teachers as well as private school teachers, and I know how important education is for society. Now in this video, we're going to take a look at education really quickly, what's happening to it, why we're getting burned out in the classroom, and then what mindset and approach that we need to take to get back to loving teaching again. And we're going to look at, can we do it ourselves? Or is this something that we need to try to shift as far as policy or educational formats in our area where we live? So everybody knows that the children are all connected to devices all the time. Many schools are so aware that the devices are connected to the children all the time and are becoming more and more of a problem that they're even starting to pass laws now saying that children cannot use devices in the classroom. I actually think this is really wise. I'm in favor of this because the school teachers have a job to do. And even though children have, certain rights and stuff like that, there are some places where rules exist so that the people who are there, who are getting paid taxpayer dollars, can get what they need to accomplished. And if a person is distracted all the time because of a device, then the teacher's probably not going to get the material through the child. Education is not really about getting through the material, although a lot of times we think that, as we think in terms of matriculation and getting done with things by a certain time. But really, education, true education, is about getting the education through you, which means you take it personally, you're inspired. I think when a teacher goes into teaching, they love a certain subject area. That is exactly what they hope for their students. They hope that their students will love biology just as much as they do, that they will find some spark of information about life maybe, and how it's formed, and cells, and see this magic and power that's there, and they'll want to study it more on their own. But you know what? We have more and more students all the time deciding not to continue education. I'm not motivated in that. I don't care about that. So the sparks are not flying like they should be. Teachers are not getting the effect that they're hoping for. This leads to burnout. Teachers are seeing that the students are lacking engagement, not only with them, but also with each other. And quite frankly, many teachers are just feeling like the students are not turning out. Now, don't get me wrong. There's still a lot of motivated, great students out there. They're working really hard. They might even need a more rigorous education. This also could be frustrating for teachers. Many teacher friends of mine and people within the family talk to me about education and about how frustrated they are with how education has changed. Some of the reasons that teachers have burnout is because everything has gone online. They feel like they're being crippled as teachers because they have to present other people's ideas. And if they do something old-fashioned like bringing out paper, suddenly they're chastised, sometimes even by their colleagues and administrations, for not sticking to the material that are on the Chromebooks and the programs. Do you know how expensive teaching curriculum is now because it's all digital and because it's subscription-based? What a joke that is. It used to be you could buy a book, a math book, you could use it for like 5, 6, 10, 12, 20 years, because how often does math really change? I mean, let's think about it, numbers are numbers, right? You could just buy the book once, you could use it in your school until the books were falling apart, because the education was still valuable. Not so now. You can't even buy a book for curriculum. Now you have to get everything online in this digital format, and you have to pay a subscription for it. Do you know how much that costs taxpayers? And what are we getting getting for that cost? We're getting distracted children. We're getting teachers who don't get to teach, don't get to be creative, don't get to see the sparks fly, who have been diminished to being nothing more than just facilitators in the classroom. Anyone could do their job. In fact, there are some school districts around the nation who are now starting to hire teachers who don't even have to pass basics in math and reading tests in order to be hired as teachers. They don't even care if they've gone through the teaching programs anymore. And why would they? Because if they only need to facilitate what happens on the computer, all they need to know is how to teach the child what's on that computer and make them do it and tell them what comes next. They just need to be a facilitator. But there's something else they need to know, because this is another thing leading to burnout and low teacher retention right now around the nation. They also need to know how to control the behaviors in those children or how to handle them. And the survey is out on that. People are putting tons of money into all kinds of civics programs, emotional and social learning programs, and these programs are making the problem worse. They are leading toward entitlement, justification, excuses, classifying people. These types of curriculums really end up just stereotyping everybody in an effort to not stereotype everybody. The Justice Department in the government is starting to get involved in schools and create schools like mini justice campuses where they're worried more about ideological things and classifying people than they even are about education. It's so incredibly distracting, and the teachers are starting to walk away from classrooms, take certain students and just leave wild children to destroy things in the classroom. People are so entitled, and it just feels like a tsunami of death is coming at them. Why wouldn't you get burned out in that environment? I don't blame you. It's hard. So how can we develop a love of teaching with all of this again? So years ago, I was introduced to a type of education called a Thomas Jefferson education. I started reading that in a book by Oliver Van de Mille. The book is called A Thomas Jefferson Education. He has other ones too called like The Phases of Learning and TJ Ed for Teens and stuff. But anyway, that first book, A Thomas Jefferson Education, talked about the different formats of learning. When I learned that, the stuff in that book, that there was assembly line learning, and then there was that competitive assembly line, and then there was that leadership education, I was like, no brainer. I want the leadership education for my students, for all the people that I teach. So then he talked about the environments of learning. One of the main environments of learning is discussion. Our students are not getting the discussion anymore. That's super important. What we need to do is reinvent education in our classroom. Take it on as a project. Start learning on your own about how people learn. That book is a really good place to start. There are other places as well. Now, I speak at a lot of education conferences. I actually speak at a lot of homeschooling conferences, and there's one thing that I tell people there. So not everybody at those conferences actually wants to homeschool their children, but they're interested in the education learning that comes out of those conferences because it's so innovative. Because people who homeschool really go back to the nuts and bolts of how people learn. They don't just teach a curriculum or, learn behavior modification or social justice. No, they actually learn how people learn. How did the sparks fly? What do we do there? And I always tell people, you need to learn how people learn. That is one of your number one most important things that you can do. And if you can learn that as a teacher, if you can go through that learning yourself and you focus on you learning, inspiring things and telling it to them, then it will make all the difference. So every adult is actually a homeschooler. You connect with other people all the time. It's just the ones that know they are homeschoolers that have the greatest benefit because they are more intentional in all the things that they do. As you go about education in your classroom, start reading books for yourself. Read books about education. Start with Dr. Oliver de Mille. Maybe also start with teaching self-government. There's something else that you can do that you can incorporate into your classroom that will help you with all the behavioral stuff, where you won't get bogged down with all of the social and emotional learning stuff that's actually not helping, sometimes even hurting in the classrooms. And that is that there is a program, a teaching self-government program. It's called Teaching Self-Government Skills for Success, Classroom Behavior and Discipline Framework. So this program, you can find it at teachingselfgovernment.com. And in some states, they are just adopting it for the whole state, and that any teacher can opt into it if they want to. And they've made pilot programs out of it, and they're moving forward as an option for teaching because it brings it back to the skills and principles of good behavior, good communication. They're adult skills that everybody needs. There's problem solving that happens there. The students take responsibility for how they are thinking and what they are doing, and it helps them frame those thoughts and those behaviors in a light where they have to take responsibility. They can't blame people anymore. That is another help that I have for you. If you want to learn more about how I homeschooled, because there is a whole website about that, there's a website called partofhomeschooling.net. There's some free content on there that I did at the time of COVID that will go into some of the principles of education there and how we structure things. My father, who taught in a public school for his entire life, as well as being a university professor, he learned about a Thomas Jefferson education. He changed everything he was doing. I know it's harder now because of all the digital stuff, but be brave. Don't let those things be open and on all the time. Turn them off, remove them, and put the little shoe pockets in front of the class and have the children come put their phones in it if your class has not adopted a no phones in class policy yet. Just do it. Teachers are doing it all over. They're not waiting anymore for the district and the state to tell them that they can or they can't fix something. They're taking ownership of education, and that's what they need to do. Be inspiring. Your students need that from you, and as soon as you get inspired and you start sharing some of that stuff with them, then they'll get inspired again too, and voila, love of learning.